Senator Creighton, thank you for doing that, and I've listened carefully to the answers you've given, and I want to make sure we get something clear. It is not your intent to prevent a political subdivision from adopting or enforcing a non-discrimination ordinance. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
It's not my intent, and,
okay.
And it has nothing to do with the legislation.
Well, and we'll talk about that in a second, but I want to make sure that I get that you do not intend to prevent a political subdivision from adopting or enforcing a non-discrimination ordinance. If that's the case, will you accept an amendment that contains the language you originally filed in Senate Bill 15 to ensure that your intent is what's actually captured in the law?
I think, Senator Watson, it'd be a much better route on the policy to keep all of that language referenced out. Because it really is nothing to do with any discrimination ordinance.
You say that, and I want to ask about that in a second. Yeah. But in order to, obviously there's concern that if that is really your intent, and you stripped that language out of Senate Bill 15, and then you filed these bills as single-shot bills, if you really, truly don't intend to prevent or prohibit a political subdivision from adopting or enforcing a non-discrimination ordinance, you could put that language in that says this bill does not prevent or prohibit it. Can you tell me what changed between February 12th, 2019, when you filed Senate Bill 15 with this exact language, and now?
Yes.
Tell me what that was.
Well, first of all, most of my bills have changed. So all of our bills through the committee process, as you and I both know.
But this specifically, why did you strip out this?
I'm with you. But on Senate Bill 15 that you're referencing, because these bills weren't filed in February.
I understand.
But on
these bills are what you would call subsets of 15, right?
They're narrower. The policy's narrowed in. So the very distinction that you and I are talking about, and my answer to your question is Senate Bill 15, as originally filed, was very broad in scope. The language was very broad. It contained NDO language in it because the rest of the bill was.
But you stripped it out
very broadly, right?
Even when the bill was still broad.
Correct. And as it continued to change and evolve, it just became very clear that particular substitute, it created too much discord with that particular bill. So we narrowed it down for the business climate, as important as it is in Texas to protect. We continue to do what we normally do around here, which is we have different vehicles that establish or continue to advance our policy goals in place. And so when we continue to narrow down on sick leave and on hiring schedules and on hiring policies and on
but the bottom line is, even though
it became less and less and less necessary to have the NDO language at all.
Well, there are those that disagree with you on that, and if that's truly your intent, it would be pretty easy to put that in there and make sure that your bill clearly is that your intent is actually captured in the law. So let me ask you about the bill. The bill prohibits an ordinance that would, quote, mandate a private employer's terms of employment relating to employment benefits. Is that correct?
That's right.
Mandate means order somebody to do something or not to do something, correct?
It would seem so, yeah. Direct
them, instruct them, order them, tell them like that. So if an ordinance says you may not discriminate between people based upon gender, or you may not provide different terms of employment to a person because they're African American, or you may not provide different terms of employment to a person because they're Hispanic or because of their sexual orientation, that would be an ordinance creating a mandate regarding a private employer's terms of employment, correct?
If the ordinance was passed, yes, that would be a mandate on private businesses.
So if you had an ordinance that expressly said you may not discriminate based upon the terms of employment, in other words, a non-discrimination ordinance, that would be an ordinance mandating a private employer's terms of employment and void and unenforceable under your bill. So your bill does in fact say there's a mandate against non-discrimination ordinances because they inherently go to the terms of employment. So respectfully, let me ask you again, since your bill's express terms contradict your stated intent, I want to ask you again, will you accept an amendment to clearly incorporate the intent of your bill into your bill and say that a non-discriminating cities can continue to have non-discrimination ordinances and it's not affected by this?
No.
All right, thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Watson, the NDOs are still allowed after this bill would be passed, so there wouldn't be.
And Senator Creighton, with all due respect, I truly take you at your word that you want that to be the case.
Yes.
I truly do. But we just established that you have a bill that says the ordinance is void and unenforceable if it mandates the terms of employment. If you have a non-discrimination ordinance that says as part of the terms of employment, you may not discriminate based on race, gender, sexual orientation, whatever, in your terms of employment, that is mandating the terms of employment. And if you want to be clear, you should put the non-discrimination language back in here. You refuse to do that, and that's part of the problem. And I will tell you that the courts have made it very clear that it's not enough, no matter how well-intentioned you are, to stand on the floor of the Senate and say, it is my intent.
No,
courts will look at the words of your statute.
Yeah, I mean, our committee testimony established, and when you say we established just now in our conversation, we didn't. I think you established it. I don't agree with what you're saying, because what you're saying is implying that NDOs would still not be possible after the passage of this legislation.
Senator Creighton, if NDOs address terms of employment, in other words, you can't pay an African American less money than you pay an Anglo, or you can't have an African American work longer hours, or whatever terms, sick leave. You can't say that one person gets a type of sick leave and another doesn't. Those are terms of employment, and under your bill, that would mandate, that would order, that would tell them to do something with regard to terms of employment, and it would be void and unenforceable.
It's not the case. I mean, and that's why the Attorney General's opinion in committee was consistent with the same. When the policies are very narrow in scope, not like Senate Bill 15 that I think you're debating now, but when the policies...
No, I'm reading from your bill 2485.
Yeah.
But thank you, Senator Creighton. Thank you, Mr. President.
When the policies are narrow in scope, it's not affecting the NDO.